Yo, I've got a ton of SpongeBob Easter eggs and facts and all that for you guys today, but I'm curious. Lately, I've been really focusing on season 1 and covering just all the details of season 1. But let me know in the comments, do you guys want me to add some more variety to it and start covering other episodes, not just in season 1? Let me know in the comments. I'm gonna shut up and get into the Easter eggs, just let me know. But let's get into our first episode. The episode Plankton is one of the most important season 1 episodes because it introduces two characters who would eventually become a massive part of SpongeBob history, them being Sheldon J. Plankton and of course his computer wife Karen. Now before this episode Plankton, the Krusty Krab didn't really have a main villain. Well, that changed in this episode. And though the character starts off tiny, both literally and in terms of his early role within the show, this episode sets up the entire Chum Bucket versus Krusty Krab dynamic. But a funny detail about Plankton's creation is that Doug Lawrence, the voice actor who ended up playing him, originally wanted to use that now iconic Plankton voice for SpongeBob instead.
I know you got it. I know you got the secret formula on you right now. So hand it over. Hand it over.
When he was first brought in for voices, he auditioned for SpongeBob and specifically used the Plankton voice during his pitch, which is just crazy to imagine. Imagine SpongeBob with Plankton's voice.
I came in auditioning for that, and I did the Plankton's voice for the SpongeBob character because it was a voice that I was in, this deep voice that I used to do that I used to make Tom laugh, and I never really had him as a voice. I just did him sometimes in the Rocco records. And Tom Kenny would always laugh when I would do that.
Like I said, it's crazy to even imagine a world where SpongeBob uses Plankton's voice. But yeah, this didn't end up happening, as most of you know. After Stephen Hillenburg heard Doug Lawrence's pitch tape, he immediately felt that the voice was actually more suited for Plankton. But Nickelodeon themselves apparently were not fully convinced at first, with Doug stating on many occasions that Stephen Hillenburg really had to push for him and prove that he was right for the role, which again is crazy because this dude just nails Plankton's voice. So imagine if somebody else voiced the character.
So we figured this is, it should be a slam dunk. Instead it was, we're still, we saw you want to hire Doug, but Steve would go, can you write something and record it and send it to New York? I kept writing things at my desk.
That's Plankton.
This fast, writing down stuff for me to say, printing it out, running downstairs, recording it, and they're sending it to New York, and I did that a few times. And they said, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I don't know. We're still not sure. We're still on the fence here about Doug. We still think it'd be best to get a famous person playing this.
In hindsight, Hillenburg's instinct was obviously right. I mean, Doug's voice gives Plankton this perfect mix of anger and honestly ego. Like the voice sounds like your typical ego maniac character, which is exactly what the Plankton character needed. But something even more interesting about Plankton in this episode itself is that even after Plankton found the right voice, the character was still not guaranteed to become a major or main character that's a part of the main SpongeBob cast. As a matter of fact, Stephen Hillenburg only wanted to use Plankton as a one-off, or at most a very occasional character. And this was due to the concern that Plankton's stories could become repetitive and predictable. I mean, if every single SpongeBob episode was just him trying to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula, it would get pretty old very fast. So because of that, during season 1, Hillenburg actually demoted Plankton from a main character to more of a minor role. But Doug Lawrence had a big hand in changing that. And this was due to the fact that Lawrence was not just Plankton's voice actor, he was also a writer on the show, and he really liked the character. In a 2015 newspaper interview, he explained that Plankton was only supposed to appear in 1 or 2 episodes. But because he was a writer and enjoyed the character so much, he started coming up with more ideas for him. And this eventually proved to Stephen Hillenburg that Plankton could maybe work more than just a one-time gag. Here's a random fact for you guys, but if you go to the credits of the first SpongeBob movie, the 2004 one, this was actually the first time that the main cast was actually highlighted in the credits. And if we look, this was also the first time that Plankton and Karen were considered as main characters. But it's not all about Plankton. We also gotta talk about Karen, as Plankton would not nearly be as entertaining without her. In this first episode giving her her first appearance, Karen is not really the character that fans know today. She's introduced as Plankton's waterproof computer system, and at this point, she's not even treated as his wife yet. And this is because originally, Karen was planned to be more like a computer computer component that could be attached to Plankton's inventions. And that's actually how she functions in this episode. For example, when Plankton controls SpongeBob and tries to scan the ingredients of the Krabby Patty, Karen is basically the part of the machine doing the scanning, as you can see in this clip right here.
Seaweed, 50% sea, 50% weed.
Like I said, it's a very different Karen. She isn't arguing with Plankton, and honestly, she's closer to like a text-to-speech program than an actual character. But as we all know, this would be refined over the years. Eventually, Karen becomes Plankton's wife, and honestly, the smarter half of most of his plans. She isn't just a computer, but she's now also his nagging wife who feeds him holographic meatloaf and also assists in all of his nefarious plans. And this was all thanks to Doug Lawrence. As once Lawrence decided that Plankton and Karen should basically be an inseparable duo, Karen's role started evolving to what I was just talking about, her being Plankton's wife. But I am kind of rambling here because none of that is really present in this episode Plankton, at least not yet. But it's cool to see this early version of the character before she evolved into what we know today. And also, looking back at this early version kind of makes it easier to understand why Stephen Hillenburg may have been worried that Plankton's stories would become repetitive, considering that the actual dynamic between Plankton and Karen was not even figured out yet. But yeah, let's move on from this because I've spent a lot of time on the origins of Plankton and Karen here. But this episode itself also has a bunch of trivia and weird details that I'd like to point out. And one of them happens right at the start, when SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs laugh together at the Krusty Krab. As SpongeBob's laugh here sounds like a variant of the iconic laugh that we all know. But at the same time, it's not really the same. Here, take a listen. As you heard, it has a slightly different pitch in delivery, almost as if the series was still experimenting on what SpongeBob's laugh should actually sound like. Which makes sense considering, SpongeBob's laugh would become one of the most recognizable sounds in like the entire cartoon universe, but not this version of it. This version of it just sounds weird. I'm gonna play the clip again and just listen to this.
Enough, lad, it wasn't that funny. Get back to work!
Now, what makes this one even more interesting is that this exact alternate laugh appears as an unused sound file in the game Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. The more familiar laugh, the iconic one that we all know, did make it into the game, which makes it seem like this version was consciously dropped and just scrapped at one point. But also, there's another small one-off design choice later in the episode when SpongeBob goes to sleep. As if we look at his mattress, it actually has flower prints on it now. It's not a big deal, but this is kind of unusual because SpongeBob's mattress has never had these flower prints before this episode. Like, here's a shot of it before this episode, and even after it, it's just never happened again. Which, don't get it twisted, yes, SpongeBob's blanket is the thing that usually has a flower pattern, but not the actual mattress. So this was most likely either a small art team mistake or another case of the production team still experimenting with SpongeBob's room design. Which, as you've seen if you've been watching my videos, season 1 has quite a few moments like this, where a background detail does not fully match up with what would later become the standard in the series. They're not a big deal, but I'm just a nerd and love catching this stuff. But yeah, while SpongeBob's bedroom has that odd mattress detail, Plankton also gives us a couple of important location debuts that actually stayed very consistent over the years. For example, this is the first episode to ever show SpongeBob's kitchen and Squidward's bedroom, both locations that would appear again later on multiple times. And to give the art team credit, they actually stay pretty close to how they look here, which is interesting because a lot of early season 1 locations have small changes before the art team fully locked them in. But these two spaces in particular were already pretty solid from their first appearance. Moving on though, like a lot of classic season 1 episodes, Plankton has also been referenced years later in newer SpongeBob episodes. For example, in season 16, Patrick's grandfather, Grandpat, quickly travels back to this episode during the time travel special, SpongeBob and Patrick's Timeline Twist-Up, which is actually pretty common. Again, if you've been watching all of my season 1 content, this episode from season 16 comes up a lot because there's a lot of Easter eggs in it to season 1. But yeah, it just shows how important and iconic this episode actually is. But we're not done yet. I still got some more interesting trivia about this one, as the episode has even appeared outside of the SpongeBob cartoon itself. Believe it or not, in a Big Bang Theory episode, the character Sheldon is seen watching this exact episode Plankton on his phone. It It's specifically the scene where SpongeBob is being controlled by Plankton and breaks through this wall in Squidward's house. So talk about a random cameo, but also it's kind of really funny if you think about it that a character named Sheldon is watching an episode about Sheldon Plankton. Also though, a very quick clip from this episode was also used in a 2010 Chia Pet commercial.
Chia Pets, the pottery that grows. And now there's the Chia Gnome. Chia SpongeBob.
Now, one last random detail I want to talk about is small enough that most people would never even notice it, but it's still kind of interesting. And this one I'm going to give complete credit to the SpongeBob wiki for. A lot of these other ones I had to do research on my own to confirm it all and add to it, but this one detail is straight from the wiki, and shout out to the SpongeBob Wikipedia or Spongepedia admins for finding this because it's crazy. But in this episode Plankton, the sesame seeds on the Krabby Patty buns are colored white, as you can see here. But this is a weird inconsistency in season 1, as in most season 1 episodes and even some early season 2 episodes, the sesame seeds are usually black. If we head over to the episode Help Wanted, we can see that those seeds are clearly black right here. But in this episode, they randomly appear as white, so I'm not sure why. This was most likely the art team not really landing on a permanent choice for the Krabby Patties, but it's also that they probably didn't expect any nerds like me or the SpongeBob fandom admins to find something like this. So I think we can all agree that we all need to touch grass. But hey, at least now you know this fun fact about the poppy seeds with Krabby Patties. Now I've got even more Easter eggs, trivia, and yada yada yada. You guys know what's coming up. I've got more good stuff coming up, but real quick, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'm one of the only non-AI SpongeBob sleep channels, so all my content, guys, is made by me. It takes hours to make. I put a lot of love into it. I'm not just like Karen the computer, you know what I mean? I'm not just spitting it out with AI. I'm working really hard. So if you want to support a creator like me, please hit that subscribe button. It'll mean a lot, and I promise you won't regret it. And a massive thank you to all of my current subscribers. Like seriously, all of you, I'm very thankful. For example, people like Lucy, Savannah, and all of the other regulars who comment on the videos, I'm very thankful. Like seriously, I mean it. Thank you so much. But let's head over to another episode. The episode Naughty Nautical Neighbors is another pretty important early SpongeBob episode, especially because it expands the neighborhood in ways the series would keep on using for years to come. But before we get into all the locations, which is something I love to nerd out about when it comes to SpongeBob, but before we get into that, one interesting behind the scenes detail about this episode is that it originally had a completely different name. Instead of Naughty Nautical Neighbors, it was originally called Friendly Fire. And we know this because that earlier title has been revealed through behind-the-scenes production art released over the years. For example, if we look at any of the model sheets from this episode, we can see that it uses that old title, Friendly Fire, which I personally think was a better name for this episode, as it makes sense for the story since the whole plot begins with Squidward tricking SpongeBob and Patrick into fighting with each other. But yeah, since this episode was still very early in the show's run, it also served as the first appearance of several important background locations. Most notably, this was the first episode to show the backyard areas of SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick's house, or I guess Patrick's rock. And hey, these designs have stayed mostly consistent since their debut, which is really cool because that's not very common with SpongeBob. However, I will admit SpongeBob's backyard does have some weird inconsistencies over time. For example, in this episode, SpongeBob's backyard clearly includes a garage, which is a detail that should be a part of the layout. However, in some later episodes, it's completely left out. For example, in certain shots during the episode, Something Narwhal This Way Comes, the garage is just missing, and even the windows are gone. The same thing happens in the episode I Had an Accident, specifically during the scene where Sandy and Patrick try to bring SpongeBob this delicious looking cake. As you can see, the backyard is supposed to be the same location, but that garage is just missing, and I highly doubt that SpongeBob paid for renovations to get the garage removed from his house. To be fair though, more often than not, especially in modern SpongeBob, the art team does get the backyard right. In fact, it really looks like the crew may have used this exact shot from Naughty Nautical Neighbors as a reference shot in future seasons. For example, if we take a look at the episode Swimming Fools, and we do a side by side of the shots of SpongeBob's backyard from that episode and Naughty Nautical Neighbors, it's almost perfect. I mean, look at how similar they are. The only difference is that all of the fences are missing, but I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's close enough. Moving on though, this episode also expands Squidward's house in a major way, as before this, we had seen Squidward's bedroom, and only that, but this episode gives us the first look at his living room and bathroom. These areas of Squidward's house were created specifically for this episode since the plot needed SpongeBob and Patrick to spend a lot of time inside Squidward's house, since they were both trying to make him their new best friend.
Well, how about some soda, guys?
Yes, please. Thanks, friend.
How about some for your best friend?
Thanks, best friend.
Since so much of this episode happens there, the art team had to build out more of Squidward's home instead of only showing the outside or his bedroom. And what's cool is, just like the backyards, these rooms have stayed pretty consistent over the years. If we take a shot of Squidward's living room from this episode and compare it with any shot of his living room from a future episode, we can see they're pretty much the same. For example, here's a side-by-side between a shot of it from Enchanted Tiki Dreams and then this episode, Naughty Nautical Neighbors. And you guys see what I mean here. Now, even though some of the locations became more defined in this episode, I guess you could say, with the introduction of some locations, SpongeBob's bedroom does have a strange one-off difference. It's very hard to notice unless you do a side-by-side, but the inside of his room looks slightly different from how it appears in other season 1 episodes. For one, the wallpaper is much darker, and I'm circling it, but there is no visible furniture near the window, like there normally is in other shots of his bedroom in other season 1 episodes. But moving on, years later, Naughty Nautical Neighbors was referenced again through a small Easter egg in the episode Friendiversary, as during this scene right here, exact frames from this episode are used. And just to prove it, here's a side-by-side. So even in the modern day, this episode gets referenced. Now, the episode Boating School does not have a ton of hidden production trivia, especially compared to other season 1 episodes, but it does have some very important details. And I mean, the biggest reason that this episode matters is that it introduced Mrs. Puff and her boating school, one of the most important supporting characters throughout the entire series. Now, what makes her debut even more interesting is that Mrs. Puff was not just created because the writers randomly wanted SpongeBob to have a teacher. Her creation was actually tied to Nickelodeon's early concerns about the show. After Steven Hillenburg pitched the pilot episode, Nickelodeon executives did not immediately greenlight the series exactly as he presented it. And one of the biggest changes they wanted was for SpongeBob to be a child who went to school, with every episode focusing on his school life. And I mean, that would have made the series completely different from what it became. Well, Hillenburg did not want to turn SpongeBob into that kind of show. So Mrs. Puff and her boating school became the compromise, as SpongeBob could technically attend a school, which technically gave Nickelodeon what they asked for. But at the same time, the series did not have to become completely centered around classrooms or homework. So yeah, it was a very good compromise. And just saying, I actually found this concept art of Mrs. Puff right here, giving us a look at one of the earliest versions of the character. But what's even crazier is that SpongeBob being unable to drive was not actually a part of the original plan either. Today, SpongeBob failing his boating test is one of the most familiar running jokes in the entire series. But according to the June 2003 issue of Nickelodeon magazine, Hillenburg had not yet come up with the idea that Mrs. Puff and SpongeBob would be stuck in an endless quest to get him a driver's license. And as a matter of fact, some early development artwork even showed SpongeBob driving a submarine-like vehicle with no trouble at all. The original theme song also shows him driving several different vehicles, which again just proves the point that originally this concept of SpongeBob not being able to drive boats, as seen in this episode Boating School, was not the original plan whatsoever. Moving on though, since Boating School introduced a brand new location in this episode, the art team also had to put a lot of work into designing it properly. And we can see this as this is one of the first episodes where model sheets and reference drawings were made for almost every single shot of this new setting. I mean, Mrs. Puff's boating school was not just a quick background that appeared once and disappeared. It needed to function as a legit location that the series could return to. So all of these different model sheets I'm showing right here were made to make sure that the location had a consistent design. And I imagine it especially helped the animators. Also though, this episode introduced one of the most famous running gags throughout the entire show, and that's Fred yelling, "My leg," after a crash.
Red
rev up those fryers, because I am sure hungry for one. Help! Help!
My leg! Can't you see we're closed?
Now, Fred had appeared before this as a regular incidental character, and he'd continue to be more of a background character for many years after this, but this episode is where his signature catchphrase really begins. It's the first time he ever does it.
Oh, SpongeBob! Why?
This gag became one of those SpongeBob jokes that could show up almost anywhere. And I guarantee you, if you go like outside right now and you just go in a group of people and you yell it like that, someone will laugh and know what you're referencing. But yeah, it's cool to see where it originally came from. And it's crazy to think that this one gag eventually led to an entire episode about Fred and him breaking his leg. But as you guys know, I love to talk about locations in SpongeBob and how they change episode to episode. So let's talk about that, as this episode also adds a few details to SpongeBob's pineapple home. One of the smaller but still noticeable additions is the first appearance of SpongeBob's library. The show had already shown different parts of his home before, but this episode expands on the interior a little bit more, a location that even appears in some video games and media outside of the actual show, for example in Battle for Bikini Bottom. As for background characters, Boating School did not introduce nearly as many incidentals as episodes like Pickles or Ripped Pants. I've covered those episodes in the past, and as you guys know, they introduced a ton of characters. But Boating School still did add a couple of new faces to Bikini Bottom, but I will admit they're not the most memorable and they're kind of underwhelming, but incidentals 25, 26, and 50 all made their debuts here. Like I said, they're not the most iconic background characters in the series, and honestly, most fans probably don't even recognize them. But this is an example of season 1 constantly building up the population of Bikini Bottom. But also, there's a weird inconsistency with Mrs. Puff's voice throughout this episode, which does make sense considering this is like literally her first appearance ever. But at one point, she inflates in this episode, as you can see in this clip right here.
Oh, SpongeBob! Why?
Mrs. Puff, I think I cheated.
As you just heard, after Mrs. Puff inflates, she briefly speaks with a deep voice. But what's really weird is later in the episode, when paramedics put her into this ambulance, she speaks with her normal voice, even though she's still puffed up.
Okay, boys, take me away.
The show would keep being inconsistent about this detail for a while. For example, in Sandy's Rocket, Mrs. Puff speaks with a deep voice the entire time that she's inflated. But if we jump over to the episode Pranks-A-Lot, she uses her regular voice even though she's puffed up. Again, as I've said about many other details discussed today, this was most likely just the production team not fully deciding how they want her voice to sound, not fully knowing how they wanted to handle Mrs. Puff's voice. But eventually, by later seasons, they got the hang of it. Now, like a lot of classic season 1 episodes, Boating School also found its way into merchandise and marketing. For example, there's a Lego set called Mrs. Puff's Boating School, which is set number 4982, I believe. At first, I thought maybe it was just a general Mrs. Puff set, but the biggest giveaway is the antenna on SpongeBob's head, which references the part of the episode where SpongeBob and Patrick communicate during the boating exam. So yeah, lots of cool stuff in this episode, guys, and stay tuned as I'm gonna keep on covering season 1. But one more reminder, if you're new, please subscribe, guys. Like I said, no AI, and it'll mean a lot to me. But let's head in to another episode. In Season 12 Swamp Mates, Patrick and Bubble Bass get lost in a murky kelp swamp during a playdate gone wrong. Now, before we get into the Easter eggs, I actually want to talk about a deleted scene for this episode. Originally, there was supposed to be a scene where Bubble Bass and Patrick were sucked on by leeches. More specifically, their butts. As his butt was getting sucked on, Bubble Bass was going to say, "Leeches, my cheeks, I'm nothing without my bubbly orbs." However, it was revealed that this scene was eventually cut. There are the images of it that I've been showing, especially this one right here, where they're literally sucking his butt. The joke isn't really inappropriate, but I can understand why it was cut considering it is a kid's show. Here's a couple more fun facts before we get into the Easter eggs for this one, because there's some interesting stuff here. For one, have you guys ever wondered how old Bubble Bass is? Well, it's confirmed in this episode during this clip right here.
So your mother has scheduled a play date for you. I'm not 23
anymore, Mother. You'll just have to cancel it.
Well, if Bubble Bass isn't 23, then that means he's 24. So yeah, if you've ever wondered his age, yeah, he's 24. He kind of reminds me of myself, a grown man collecting collectibles and liking nerd stuff. But okay, Easter eggs, and here's the first one. If we go back years in the past to season 3, there was the episode Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 5. And this episode's really cool because it's like an Avengers style SpongeBob episode where SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and Sandy team up with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy to form an Avengers style team, with them each getting their own superhero moniker. SpongeBob is the Quickster, Sandy is Miss Appear, she can turn invisible, Squidward is Captain Magma, and Patrick is the Elastic Waistband. Together, they're the International Justice League of Super Acquaintances, and they report to the Chief, this guy right here.
Our sources last saw Evil harassing teenagers up at Makeout Reef. You know, Makeout Reef?
Now, we haven't seen this wacky character for a long time. He really only appeared in this episode. But this all changed in Swamp Mates, with Martin Olsen reprising his role and making his first appearance in like 20 plus years. It's also worth noting that if you look on his desk, there's a bunch of like fake SpongeBob toys or altered or bootleg SpongeBob toys. And this is for a reason. This is due to FCC regulations prohibiting the advertisement of merchandise related to a children's program within or during the same programming block as that program, which makes sense. It basically means that you can't advertise other SpongeBob toys or merchandise while the show is actively airing. But yeah, if we look at his desk, we can see a bootleg SpongeBob piggy bank or coin bank, a fake version of the original SpongeBob Funko Pop, and 2 other fake figures of unknown origin. Let's keep it moving though with more Easter eggs from this same episode. And to do that, we have to rewind back to the episode Goons on the Moon. In this episode, we were introduced to the Action Dog figure, the Teenage Action Boy figure, and the Teenage Action Girl action figures. Now, we haven't seen them since Goons on the Moon, and they seem to be pretty rare collectibles. And it seems that they're referenced in Swamp Mates, as look, right here, we can see all 3 figures. Really pushing the point that Bubble Bass is a major dork. If you guys could see my bedroom, I'm very similar to Bubble Bass. But let's keep it going even more, as during Bubble Bass's imaginative description of him capturing Man Ray, for one, it shows that Man Ray is a member of Evil, another reference to the episode Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 5. Like I said, in that episode, SpongeBob, Sandy, and the crew, they form their own Avengers Justice League style group. But so do all of the villains, with them forming Evil, which, as you guys should know, stands for every villain is lemons. I mean, come on. But there's more. For one, it also says that Man Ray is allergic to tartar sauce, and this is actually a fact. If we go back to the episode, Back to the Past, we can see that this is a fact.
Now prepare for a heaping helping of quick-drying tartar sauce.
And last but not least, it also shows that Man Ray hates the tickle belt, and this is another direct reference, this time to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 3. More specifically, this hilarious scene where Man Ray just cannot stop laughing.
Frequency rising! Belt out of control! Belt up too high! Tickling my DNA! Make it stop!
In the episode Tag You're It, it's a rainy day at Camp Coral, which means everybody can't really play outside. I mean, you could, but you're gonna get wet. It's better to avoid it. So everybody finds a way to entertain themselves indoors, specifically with a crazy game of tag. It's an alright episode, but what we're really here for, guys, you guys know what we're really here for, and it's Easter eggs. And the first one can be found during this scene, where we see Sandy flush her helmet almost like it's a toilet or a drain. If that looks familiar, it's because this is another direct reference, okay? This is a direct reference to OG SpongeBob, specifically the episode Texas. In this episode, Sandy starts missing her home state of Texas, and she gets very emotional. We get a couple scenes of her crying, and in one scene, she has to empty out her water bowl. Roll the clip. This is kind of like a deep cut reference, and it's cool to see that the creators of Camp Coral also knew to include this type of stuff. And there's more in Tag You're It. I really like this one, but if we go to the point in the episode about 13 minutes in and 40 seconds, if we pause at the right frame, you'll notice that there's a jar of mayo on Patrick's shelf. And this is most likely a reference to him asking if mayonnaise is an instrument in Band Geeks. Patrick seems to have some sort of obsession with mayo, which is also why it might be there. But yeah, who knew that Camp Coral actually had some cool Easter eggs like this? The episode Teacher's Pests from season 11 has a ton of Easter eggs. In this boating school episode, Mr. Krabs and Plankton are forced to attend Mrs. Puff's class, alongside their favorite person, SpongeBob, after a road rage incident. The premise sets up plenty of nods to past SpongeBob lore, so let's get into that, as I know that's what you guys clicked on the video for. Early on, Mrs. Puff shows an instructional boating safety video that pretty much gives tips and is a guide on how to drive a boat. And if this seems familiar to you, it's because this entire tutorial video is very similar to another video we got in another episode, season 5's Boat Smarts. That entire episode, Boat Smarts, is about Mrs. Puff hosting a boating safety documentary that stars SpongeBob and Squidward. So it might not be a direct reference here, but they're very similar. They have the same like vignette effect on, and it's really cool. But if we keep it moving, there's even more Easter eggs. When class begins, SpongeBob excitedly introduces something special, with him explaining how students earn gold star stickers for good behavior.
Did you know that every time you do something good, Mrs. Puff gives you a star sticker?
Stickers? I'm an adult. I don't care about stickers.
If you're a true SpongeBob fan, then you know that this is a direct callback to the iconic episode, New Student Starfish, where SpongeBob was the star pupil with a whopping 74 stars to his name across the episode.
And those drinks are recorded here on the Good Noodle Board.
Oh, sorry.
In a funny bit of continuity error, here, SpongeBob has 0 stars on the board. But to be fair, this might be good continuity. It might be because it's been so many years since New Student Starfish. Maybe the board got reset. Plus, there's still boating school episodes, but we don't see SpongeBob in boating school like we used to, so maybe that's why. But nonetheless, SpongeBob has 0 stars in this episode, despite having a bunch back in New Student Starfish. But yeah, let's keep it moving. Mr. Krabs and Plankton become immediately obsessed with this reward system and begin competing by showering Mrs. Puff with fruit to earn stars.
Oh, is someone hungry? Ta-da!
Ooh, a grapefruit.
How about some melon?
Mrs. Puff soon realizes that they're bribing for stickers and snaps, exclaiming, "None of you will get any stars," effectively ending the contest. But this rivalry escalates through the driving test, leading to a chaotic finale. Notably, SpongeBob himself drives perfectly fine during the test, which is actually really weird considering the fact that SpongeBob is like unteachable. As you guys know, there have been so many gags throughout the show where SpongeBob just cannot drive. And he's tried, but he's just not very good at it. But yeah, I wanted to point this out because this is a really funny inconsistency. But let's get back to the Easter eggs, as there's a ton during the mayhem. When Mrs. Puff has had enough of Mr. Krabs and Plankton's antics, she uproots an entire apple tree and whacks them with it, shouting a very specific line.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
So this one's really weird, but this line is actually a sneaky reference to the video game Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, in which protagonist Jill Valentine says the exact same phrase before defeating the final boss.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
This is a very surprising deep cut, an M-rated game quote tucked into a SpongeBob episode. But hey, it suits Mrs. Puff like pretty well considering she's a crazy character. I guess whoever wrote this episode, or somebody on the art team, or just somebody is a fan of Resident Evil and found a way to sneak it in. They were probably in the middle of a Resident Evil 3 playthrough and were like, I'm just gonna find a way to put this in SpongeBob. The scene even shows cartoon stars circling the dazed Plankton's head. Teacher's Pet also plays with long-term continuity, but they also made a little bit of a mistake. Weirdly enough, Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff act like complete strangers in this classroom setting, despite having met and fallen in love back in Krusty Love, and having dated for 16 years as of the episode Whirly Brains.
Mrs. Puff, we've been dating for 16 years now, so I was sincerely hoping that today might finally be the day that...
Yes, Eugene?
That I steal a little kiss?
Oh!
There's no on-screen explanation for this memory lapse, and was most likely an oversight by newer writers, who maybe didn't know this bit of SpongeBob lore, but hey, I'm an old school fan and I could not help but notice. The episode is packed with visual callbacks as well. In the background is a very familiar billboard. This right here is the Barnacle Chips billboard, representing the cholesterol-free snack from the iconic episode Chocolate with Nuts, which is where this billboard made its first appearance.
Eat Barnacle Chips, they're delicious.
They are most certainly not delicious.
Not the way I use them.
This exact same billboard also appeared in a later episode, Burst Your Bubble.
You got on the freeway by mistake!
So its inclusion here, making a third appearance, is a clear wink from the staff to eagle-eyed viewers like myself. This isn't just like a random billboard, I want to make this clear. This is 100% an Easter egg or reference from the production team, and it's really cool. But later, when a driving mishap fuses SpongeBob, Plankton, and Mr. Krabs into one grotesque body, Plankton ends up occupying one of Mr. Krabs' eye sockets.
Mr. Plankton, you were in a horrible boat accident. It's a miracle that you're alive. However, there were some complications.
Hey, what's all the screaming up there? Forget class. Now we can be together forever.
And this might not be a direct reference, but it's a bizarre sight that's directly reminiscent of a gag in another episode. The episode being The Other Patty, where the two rival restaurateurs also combined into a single being. It's an obscure reference, but side by side, as you can see here, the scenes are very, very close. Finally though, this episode actually had a scene that didn't make it into the final airing, or even just the final version of the episode at all. A deleted scene, where during the last session, SpongeBob unknowingly runs over a line of fake pedestrian cutouts on the test track. I actually was able to find the clip that was cut because Cartoon Corey goes so hard for you guys. And I mean, also shout out to the SpongeBob wiki. And yeah, this moment isn't necessarily that dark, but it seems that it was later deemed too edgy for modern SpongeBob, and thus was removed from the episode, which honestly is actually a telling sign of changing standards. In earlier seasons of SpongeBob, a throwaway gag like this definitely would have flown under the radar. Like if you think of SpongeBob seasons 1, 2, and 3, there are tons of jokes like this in those episodes. But it seems that today, Nickelodeon is playing it a little more safe. However, if we go back in time, there are still some gags from earlier SpongeBob that were too inappropriate. And this brings us to our next episode, Just One Bite from season 3. This classic episode centers on Squidward's secret love for Krabby Patties, where basically he acts like he hates them, but once he tries one and takes like the smallest bite you could humanly take, yeah, that was the smallest bite ever. But after this, Squidward becomes addicted to Krabby Patties. And this episode, Just One Bite, is actually famous amongst fans for a scene that vanished after its original airing. This is another deleted scene. The deleted scene in question occurs during Squidward's midnight break-in. In the uncut version, shown only during the Totally Twisted telly premiere back in 2001, Mr. Krabs had set up a booby trap in the Krusty Krab for intruders to prevent people from breaking in when the stores close. But instead of a regular alarm system, he does something pretty crazy. Squidward sneaks through the door only to have a bucket of gasoline tip over and drench him. And what happens next is pretty crazy considering this is a kid's show.
Hey, this isn't water. This is gas.
This over-the-top trap, a bucket of gas, and a robot arm is oddly high-tech for Mr. Krabs, just saying, who usually isn't very tech-savvy, but it certainly shows the lengths that Mr. Krabs would go to protect his secret formula. But here's where the controversy comes in. By early 2002, Nickelodeon removed this gasoline trap scene from all reruns and future releases. They just cut that chunk out of the episode pretty much, so it just jumps. And also, I want to point out, if you're from Canada, this didn't actually happen overseas or in Canada, and let me explain why. You know, I try to keep my content as accessible as possible. That way kids can watch it, and people my age, older people who grew up with the show, can also enjoy these videos. So just a heads up, this part is controversial, but it's also educational as well, I guess. As eventually, the official reason for this scene being cut came out later. The reason it was cut was in part out of sensitivity due to the episode airing shortly after 9/11, and largely due to standards and practices concerns about kids potentially imitating the dangerous gag with matches and fuel. And this isn't just speculation. Writer Jay Lender confirmed that even though the scene initially passed Nickelodeon censors, the network reconsidered after the September 2001 attacks. But yeah, like I said, if you're a Canadian boy like me, that's why you remember seeing this scene still, as Canadian airings on YTV still kept the scene in. But yeah, there's a little fun fact for you guys. I know that wasn't necessarily an Easter egg, but in these videos, I'm probably going to start covering trivia and facts as well, and you gotta admit that was interesting. The episode Teacher's Pests from season 11 has a ton of Easter eggs. In this boating school episode, Mr. Krabs and Plankton are forced to attend Mrs. Puff's class, alongside their favorite person, SpongeBob, after a road rage incident. The premise sets up plenty of nods to past SpongeBob lore, so let's get into that, as I know that's what you guys clicked on the video for. Early on, Mrs. Puff shows an instructional boating safety video that pretty much gives tips and is a guide on how to drive a boat. And if this seems familiar to you, it's because this entire tutorial video is very similar to another video we got in another episode, season 5's Boat Smarts. That entire episode, Boat Smarts, is about Mrs. Puff hosting a boating safety documentary that stars SpongeBob and Squidward. So it might not be a direct reference here, but they're very similar. They have the same like vignette effect on, and it's really cool. But if we keep it moving, there's even more Easter eggs. When class begins, SpongeBob excitedly introduces something special, with him explaining how students earn gold star stickers for good behavior.
Did you know that every time you do something good, Mrs. Puff gives you a star sticker?
Stickers? I'm an adult. I don't care about stickers.
If you're a true SpongeBob fan, then you know that this is a direct callback to the iconic episode, New Student Starfish, where SpongeBob was the star pupil with a whopping 74 stars to his name across the episode.
And those drinks are recorded here, on the Good Noodle board.
Huh? Oh, sorry.
In a funny bit of continuity error, here, SpongeBob has 0 stars on the board. But to be fair, this might be good continuity. It might be because it's been so many years since New Student Starfish. Maybe the board got reset. Plus, there's still boating school episodes, but we don't see SpongeBob in boating school like we used to, so maybe that's why. But nonetheless, SpongeBob has 0 stars in this episode, despite having a bunch back in New Student Starfish. But yeah, let's keep it moving. Mr. Krabs and Plankton become immediately obsessed with this reward system and begin competing by showering Mrs. Puff with fruit to earn stars.
Oh, is someone hungry? Ta-da!
Oh, a grapefruit.
How about some melon?
Mrs. Puff soon realizes that they're bribing for stickers and snaps, exclaiming, "None of you will get any stars," effectively ending the contest. But this rivalry escalates through the driving test, leading to a chaotic finale. Notably, SpongeBob himself drives perfectly fine during the test, which is actually really weird considering the fact that SpongeBob is like unteachable. As you guys know, there have been so many gags throughout the show where SpongeBob just cannot drive. And he's tried, but he's just not very good at it. But yeah, I wanted to point this out because this is a really funny inconsistency. But let's get back to the Easter eggs, as there's a ton during the mayhem. When Mrs. Puff has had enough of Mr. Krabs and Plankton's antics, she uproots an entire apple tree and whacks them with it, shouting a very specific line.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
So this one's really weird, but this line is actually a sneaky reference to the video game Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, in which protagonist Jill Valentine says the exact same phrase before defeating the final boss.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
This is a very surprising deep cut, an M-rated game quote tucked into a SpongeBob episode. But hey, it suits Mrs. Puff like pretty well considering she's a crazy character. I guess whoever wrote this episode or somebody on the art team or just somebody is a fan of Resident Evil and found a way to sneak it in. They were probably in the middle of a Resident Evil 3 playthrough and were like, I'm just gonna find a way to put this in SpongeBob. The scene even shows cartoon stars circling the dazed Plankton's head. Teacher's Pet also plays with long-term continuity, but they also made a little bit of a mistake. Weirdly enough, Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff act like complete strangers in this classroom setting, despite having met and fallen in love back in Krusty Love, and having dated for 16 years as of the episode Whirly Brains.
Mrs. Puff, we've been dating for 16 years now, so I was sincerely hoping that today might finally be the day that...
Yes, Eugene?
That I steal a little kiss?
There's no on-screen explanation for this memory lapse, and was most likely an oversight by newer writers, who maybe didn't know this bit of SpongeBob lore. But hey, I'm an old school fan and I could not help but notice. The episode is packed with visual callbacks as well. In the background is a very familiar billboard. This right here is the Barnacle Chips billboard, representing the cholesterol-free snack from the iconic episode Chocolate with Nuts, which is where this billboard made its first appearance.
Eat barnacle chips, they're delicious.
They are most certainly not delicious.
Not the way I use them.
This exact same billboard also appeared in a later episode, Burst Your Bubble.
You got on the freeway by mistake!
So its inclusion here, making a third appearance, is a clear wink from the staff to eagle-eyed viewers like myself. This isn't just like a random billboard, I want to make this clear. This is 100% an Easter egg or reference from the production team, and it's really cool. But later, when a driving mishap fuses SpongeBob, Plankton, and Mr. Krabs into one grotesque body, Plankton ends up occupying one of Mr. Krabs' eye sockets.
Mr. Plankton, you were in a horrible boat accident. It's a miracle that you're alive. However, there were some complications.
Hey, what's all the screaming up there? Forget class. Now we can be together forever.
And this might not be a direct reference, but it's a bizarre sight that's directly reminiscent of a gag in another episode. The episode being The Other Patty, where the two rival restaurateurs also combined into a single being.
Show ya.
It's an obscure reference, but side by side, as you can see here, the scenes are very, very close. Finally though, this episode actually had a scene that didn't make it into the final airing, or even just the final version of the episode at all, a deleted scene, where during the last session, SpongeBob unknowingly runs over a line of fake pedestrian cutouts on the test track. I actually was able to find the clip that was cut because Cartoon Corey goes so hard for you guys, and I mean also shout out to the SpongeBob wiki. And yeah, this moment isn't necessarily that dark, but it seems that it was later deemed too edgy for modern SpongeBob, and thus was removed from the episode, which honestly is actually a telling sign of changing standards. In earlier seasons of SpongeBob, a throwaway gag like this definitely would have flown under the radar. Like if you think of SpongeBob seasons 1, 2, and 3, there are tons of jokes like this in those episodes. But it seems that today, Nickelodeon is playing it a little more safe. However, if we go back in time, there are still some gags from earlier SpongeBob that were too inappropriate. And this brings us to our next episode, Just One Bite from season 3. This classic episode centers on Squidward's secret love for Krabby Patties, where basically he acts like he hates them, but once he tries one and takes like the smallest bite you could humanly take, yeah, that was the smallest bite ever. But after this, Squidward becomes addicted to Krabby Patties. And this episode, Just One Bite, is actually famous amongst fans for a scene that vanished after its original airing. This is another deleted scene. The deleted scene in question occurs during Squidward's midnight break-in. In the uncut version, shown only during the Totally Twisted telly premiere back in 2001, Mr. Krabs had set up a booby trap in the Krusty Krab for intruders to prevent people from breaking in when the stores closed. But instead instead of a regular alarm system, he does something pretty crazy. Squidward sneaks through the door only to have a bucket of gasoline tip over and drench him. And what happens next is pretty crazy considering this is a kid's show.
Hey, this isn't water. This is gas.
This over-the-top trap, a bucket of gas, and a robot arm is oddly high-tech for Mr. Krabs, just saying, who usually isn't very tech-savvy, but it certainly shows the lengths that Mr. Krabs would go to protect his secret formula. But here's where the controversy comes in. By early 2002, Nickelodeon removed this gasoline trap scene from all reruns and future releases. They just cut that chunk out of the episode pretty much, so it just jumps. And also, I want to point out, if you're from Canada, this didn't actually happen overseas or in Canada, and let me explain why. You know, I try to keep my content as accessible as possible. That way kids can watch it, and people my age, older people who grew up with the show, can also enjoy these videos. So just a heads up, this part is controversial, but it's also educational as well, I guess. As eventually, the official reason for this scene being cut came out later. The reason it was cut was in part out of sensitivity due to the episode airing shortly after 9/11, and largely due to standards and practices concerns about kids potentially imitating the dangerous gag with matches and fuel. And this isn't just speculation. Writer Jay Lender confirmed that even though the scene initially passed Nickelodeon censors, the network reconsidered after the September 2001 attacks. But yeah, like I said, if you're a Canadian boy like me, that's why you remember seeing this scene still, as Canadian airings on YTV still kept the scene in. But yeah, there's a little fun fact for you guys. I know that wasn't necessarily an Easter egg, but in these videos, I'm probably going to start covering trivia and facts as well, and you gotta admit that was interesting. In the episode Terror on Tape, the Star family spend a spooky day watching a collection of haunted VHS tapes, a collection that they got from the Flying Dutchman. Again, this is really cool, another example of them kind of building up the SpongeBob world and bringing it all together. Back in the day, if you guys remember, the Flying Dutchman was like a rare character. Like, it's not like he never appeared, but he didn't appear in every episode, and he wasn't a background character. If he did appear, he was a big part of the plot. So it's cool to see that he's just like a normal character in this episode. But anyways, this episode goes on to essentially be an anthology of mini horror spoofs, with each cursed take telling a different creepy tale, starring Patrick and his family. The episode crams in homages to famous horror tropes, and even a legendary sound effect, one that only sharp-eared and sharp-eyed fans will catch. During a chaotic scene, a hapless background fish falls overboard from the ship Fancy, and take a listen to what happens next.
We're off the menu!
If you've heard that little scream before, it's because it's a very iconic sound effect, the Wilhelm scream. The scream, a classic stock sound effect used in countless films since the 1950s, is a beloved inside joke among sound editors and movie buffs. And hearing it pop in Patrick's haunted tape is a treat for fans. But yeah, its appearance in Terror on Tape is both a cheeky nod to horror cinema and a self-aware gag about the rarity of that scream in the series. But let's keep it going, there's more. Each cursed tape Patrick watches is a send-up of a different horror genre, and the episode's artists take the opportunity to reference a beloved horror anthology film. Slayground is presented in a vivid, stylized color scheme that horror fans might find familiar. In fact, the color design of the Slayground, with its lurid reds, deep blues, and comic book style shading, is directly inspired by the 1982 horror comedy film Creepshow. Creepshow, directed by George Romero and written by Stephen King, used bold comic book panel visuals and dramatic lighting to emulate old EC horror comics. And Terror on the Tape lovingly imitates that look. In Slayground, when Patrick and Squidina explore a cursed playground, the frames occasionally freeze into drawn comic panels with saturated colors and eerie lighting, just as Creepshow did. And yeah, this is a really good episode, especially if you're a fan of like Halloween and horror. I know it isn't very fitting right now. Go give the episode a watch, it's a good one. Our next episode is The Donut of Shame, a very short episode from season 5. This bite-sized episode opens with Patrick groggily waking up on SpongeBob's ceiling after what appears to have been a wild night of partying. Who knew that Patrick got so crazy, man? Like, dude was probably staying up all night eating ice cream.
Would you like another spot of tea, Ms. Nibsy? Oh, you would?
From here, Patrick notices SpongeBob still asleep, clutching a delicious-looking donut. A beautiful specimen of donuthood, as Patrick pretty much calls it. Ever impulsive, Patrick liberates the pastry from SpongeBob's hand and sneaks it home for himself. And this is where we can find some Easter eggs, or well, some references. The animators slip in a sweet nod to the show's early days. I'm gonna roll the clip and let's see if you guys can spot it.
A beautiful specimen of donuthood. A donut this nice deserves to be served on fine china.
If you didn't catch it, let me explain. Hanging on Patrick's wall is a framed picture of SpongeBob drawn in his Season 1 art style. This is very important here. It's not a modern looking version of SpongeBob. At the time, this episode was from Season 5, and he doesn't even look like his Season 5 design. It's very clearly his Season 1 design. This deliberate background detail contrasts with the episode's Season 5 visuals, playfully reminding longtime fans of SpongeBob's classic look. Now, aside from that nostalgic little Easter egg, the donut of shame peppers in a couple of other fun touches. For example, the way Patrick awakens in this scene is a spoof of horror film tropes, mirroring a similar scene from Saw of All Things. Here is a side-by-side, and what an interesting choice for a children's cartoon. But yeah, some cool little references in this episode and some facts, but let's keep it moving and head over to a different episode. Next up is the episode The Jellyfish Kid, and this is actually the very first episode of Camp Coral, a 3D animated SpongeBob spin-off that I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with. I'm not the biggest fan of this show, I'm not gonna lie. I think the Patrick Star Show is much better, but you're not here for my opinion, you're here for Easter eggs, and there are some really cool references in this episode. For one, if we take a look at this scene and we pause at the right frame right here, we'll notice that there's this photo on Mr. Krabs' drawer. And if we zoom in, we'll see that it's him holding Pearl as a baby. Now, if this shot looks familiar, it's because this photo is a direct reference to an older SpongeBob episode. If we rewind all the way back to the episode Selling Out, we can find this exact same photo right here. Let's do a side-by-side. Yeah, this is a reference, and a really cool reference. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Camp Coral, but I love that this reference is here. But there's also more. One of my favorite episodes is the classic SpongeBob episode Sailor Mouth, where SpongeBob and Patrick come across swear words and they start swearing. Something they shouldn't do, you know, they shouldn't be swearing.
Hi, Squidward! How the are ya?
Nice day, isn't it, Squidward?
Every time they swear, though, it's referred to having a sailor's mouth. And this is also referenced in The Jellyfish Kid. In Camp Coral, it's basically like a summer camp, right? So every person has their own dorm. And in SpongeBob's dorm, we see this list of rules right here. And as you can see, one of the rules is no sailor mouth, making for another really cool reference. Our next episode is called The Other Patty. When a shady new restaurant called the Flabby Patty threatens the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob becomes determined to get Mr. Krabs and Plankton to set aside their rivalry and work together.
If you work together, the Flabby Patty recipe would be yours.
Okay, fine. We'll work together.
Yeah, I don't see that working out.
In this episode, SpongeBob poignantly reminds the two feuding restaurateurs of something fans learned in the special episode years in the past, Friend or Foe, with him saying the following line.
There was a time when Plankton and I were best friends. Friends at birth, you might say. Even as wee ones.
Go.
SpongeBob references that Mr. Krabs and Plankton at one point in time were best friends, holding up an old photograph of Krabs and Plankton during happier times. Well, this is a direct callback to the episode Friend or Foe, which revealed that the two enemies were childhood best friends before becoming like mortal enemies, all over like a smash burger secret formula. Imagine switching up on your homie just over a Krabby Patty secret formula. I don't know, it's crazy, but roll the clip.
Why are you two always fighting? You were best palsy-walsies once. Can't you two make up and be friends?
Yee! Those days are over, SpongeBob!
Krabs and I are bitter enemies.
And that's the way we like it.
By invoking their past friendship, SpongeBob is essentially referencing the events of Friend or Foe within the story, hoping that nostalgia will fix their friendship. It's a neat bit of continuity that rewards viewers who remember the 2007 special. And in the end, as you can imagine, they figure everything out, so it's a good episode. But let's head over to another one with more Easter eggs. Let's talk about the episode Unreal Estate next. It's from season 10. In this one, Squidward tricks SpongeBob into thinking his pineapple house is dangerous to live in, hoping SpongeBob will move away. Well, as SpongeBob daydreams about new homes, the episode pays homage to SpongeBob's history in many subtle ways. Right from the title card, Unreal Estate telegraphs a hidden gag, with its background art being pretty much the same as another episode's background art, Sentimental Sponge. Both cards share a bold, colorful geometric pattern. The only difference is the color, with it being pink in Unreal Estate and yellow or orange in Sentimental Sponge. And while it's possible that they may have just reused the asset, SpongeBob writers and producers and artists in the past have done this, where they use a similar piece of art in the title card to pay homage to an older episode. I am rambling though, and this one definitely sounds like a little bit of a reach, but let's head over to more interesting Easter eggs. In the episode Visiting Vikings, Patrick and SpongeBob celebrate Leif Erikson Day by embarking on a time-traveling journey to the actual Viking times. Courtesy of some of Patrick-style nonsense, they wind up in the era of real Vikings, complete with long beards and Norse helmets.
Who are you? We are from the future, where you are a fearsome Viking warrior. But it looks like we got here a little early. So I guess it's up to us to mold you from Meatball Boy into a real Viking warrior.
This zany premise is itself a deep-cut reference. Leif Erikson Day has been mentioned in SpongeBob before, and this episode goes out of its way to honor that legacy. Early on, as Patrick gears up for the holiday, SpongeBob makes a special appearance wearing a traditional Viking helmet and a big red beard. It looks good on him, right? Like, what do you guys think? I think it looks good on him. But yeah, SpongeBob cheerfully exclaims, "Hinga dinga durgan." And you know what? Me saying it didn't do it justice. Play the clip of SpongeBob saying it.
Hi, SpongeBob, hi!
Happy Leif Erikson Day! Hinga dinga durgan.
Now, longtime fans should instantly recognize this costume and catchphrase from the classic season 2 episode Bubble Buddy, as we get a very similar scene. This is 100% a reference. In Bubble Buddy's opening, SpongeBob wished everyone a happy Leif Erikson Day, and to do this he dresses up in a very specific outfit and says something very, very specific. Roll the footage.
Hey everybody, it's Leif Erikson Day! Hinga dinga durgan.
As you guys just seen, SpongeBob dresses up as a stereotypical Viking, while uttering that same goofy Norwegian phrase, Hinga dinga durgan. This is another one that's connecting the universes, as this episode, Visiting Vikings, is technically a The Patrick Star Show episode, but what was just referenced is from old school SpongeBob, thus connecting the two shows even more. I know I keep on rambling on about that, but it's clear that, like, Nickelodeon is being very intentional about this. I might do a whole video just on this topic. It's stand-up comedy night in our next episode at Camp Coral, with a legendary joke-telling sea kraken, the Wisecracken, headlining a show for the campers. This episode, Wisecracken, doubles as a tribute to SpongeBob's comedic past, both in content and in cheeky references. For one, the outdoor comedy venue is dubbed the Comedy Canteen, which immediately rings a bell, at least for me. It seems to be a sly spin on the comedy Crab from the classic SpongeBob episode Squirrel Jokes. In that episode, Mr. Krabs briefly turned the Krusty Krab into a comedy club called the Comedy Crab.
Okay, everybody settle down. Welcome to the Comedy Crab.
Here at camp, the Comedy Canteen serves as a similar role. There's a bunch of other similarities between the Comedy Canteen and the Comedy Crab, and it's been theorized that originally it was supposed to be the Comedy Crab. However, I think that the writers forgot that this is a prequel show and that the Comedy Crab wouldn't have existed yet technically. So they had to do a swap and turn it into the Comedy Canteen. This is something I've read on Reddit, but I don't know if this is actually true or not. And to be honest with you, it sounds like a stupid fan theory, so. But before we move on to another episode, here's a fun fact about this one. So as you guys know, Lady Upturn recently has become more of a regular character on the show. She originally was like a one-off character, but since Camp Coral, even in regular SpongeBob like season 13, season 14, 15, and 16, Lady Upturn is in a ton of episodes. There are some episodes where she's like a prominent character, and sometimes she's even the antagonist. And it all started with this episode, as this is the one that introduced her main catchphrase, "I am offended."
Why did the sea captain flush the toilet?
Why?
Because it was its duty!
I am offended! Oh!
It's not that big of a deal, but it's cool to see that this is where the catchphrase originated from. In The Great Patty Capper, SpongeBob faces a Krabby Patty crisis that sends him on a crazy adventure. The episode opens at the Krusty Krab, where SpongeBob discovers they're all out of Krabby Patties.
Mr. Krabs! We're all out of Krabby Patties, sir!
That's nothing to fuss over, boy! We'll just whip up a new batch!
So, Mr. Krabs hastily brews a new batch of patty batter in the office. But in the process, Plankton attempts to steal it, so Mr. Krabs wants a more permanent solution to stop this from happening. So he mails the secret formula to a far-off vault for safekeeping, only to eventually realize he needs it back to continue cooking. From here, SpongeBob and Patrick board a high-speed train to go and retrieve the formula from a distant storage facility, while Plankton sneaks along to steal it for himself. This is actually like a half-hour special with a very interesting plot, but we're here for Easter eggs, trivia, and facts. So let's talk about that. Early on, as SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs attempt to recreate Krabby Patties from memory, the show slips in a rare bit of Krabby Patty lore. In their argument over the recipe, actual ingredients of the secret formula are mentioned, a very uncommon occurrence in the series. If you listen closely, you can learn that the formula includes flour, barnacle shavings, turmeric, and a debated type of salt.
Salt comes after barnacle shavings. Or was it lesions? I mean, no, that doesn't sound right either.
Was it pustule?
Heavens no! That's disgusting.
As you just seen, these ingredients are revealed in a comedic way. But for fans, this is actually a really cool canonical detail, finally giving us some insight into the recipe. And just saying, if you've been keeping track and have been watching all my videos, we've actually gotten other ingredients. As for example, back in Friend or Foe, we learned that seaweed sauce is also an ingredient in the Krabby Patty secret formula. So we're almost there, guys. Maybe one day we'll figure out what the actual recipe is. And as I've joked about in the past, hopefully it doesn't include any crab meat. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna put this rumor to rest. It's actually been confirmed by Steven Hillenburg and other SpongeBob producers like Vincent Waller that Krabby Patties contain no animal products whatsoever, with Krabby Patties acting more as like a veggie burger. So yeah, if you've ever wondered if that whole rumor is true, it isn't true. Back to the episode though. When Mr. Krabs decides to hide the formula off-site, the story makes a quick detour to a Bikini Bottom news broadcast. Here we get a hilarious piece of SpongeBob trivia with news anchor Perch Perkins addressing his co-anchor, the up until now nameless, realistic-looking bass fish, often seen on TV. But this time he gives him a name, which is a big thing for SpongeBob canon, calling him Elaine.
We now go to Perch Perkins live on the scene.
Thanks, Elaine.
A fun fact is that this was the first time that this character was ever given a name. Before this, we just knew him as the realistic fish head. But also, if we take a look at the 2003 video game Battle for Bikini Bottom, the developers actually gave this character a name much earlier on, calling him Johnny. So the Great Patty Capper's actually rewriting a little bit of lore, but I mean, come on, who are we gonna take more seriously, the writers of the show or the writers of the video game? Johnny is a much cooler name though, just saying. But as SpongeBob and Patrick set off on the Oceanic Express train to recover the formula, viewers might notice a familiar face, or rather a familiar character model. We eventually meet the character, the Teller, and if we look closely, this character looks very similar to the Tattletale Strangler. It's been speculated by fans that the animators essentially reused the Strangler's design for this background character. And there's differences, but they're also very similar. Who knows, maybe the Strangler cleaned up and got a day job. But honestly, this likely wasn't meant as a storyline like connection. It's probably the artists just reusing art, and you can't really blame them. Think of how many background characters and side characters there are in SpongeBob. But I still thought this was interesting. Halfway through this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick gear up, literally to search the speeding train for the missing vault key. And in a brief scene, Patrick snaps on a pair of rubber gloves. And this may give you deja vu, as these gloves look exactly like the ones he wore back in the episode Suds, if we do a side-by-side. Back in that nostalgia nostalgic episode, Patrick infamously pretended to be a doctor to treat SpongeBob's cold, but he wasn't very good at being a doctor, as you can imagine. This is Patrick Star we're talking about here. But in that episode, he donned these gloves. And honestly, while some people think that this is like an Easter egg, I think this is more similar to that Tattletale Strangler one, where the art team just reused some assets. Nonetheless though, even if they didn't do it intentionally, this is technically a reference to an older episode. Just it might not be an intentional one. But yeah, I'm gonna head into another episode, but one thing I wanted to mention, another fun fact, is that this episode was originally gonna be titled something different. It was originally going to be titled Krabby Patty No More. But yeah, that does it for this episode. Let's head into another one. The episode Friend or Foe is an ambitious half-an-hour special that dives into the childhood of Mr. Krabs and Plankton, explaining how the two became bitter rivals and giving them like a whole backstory. This is another episode that I highly recommend. It's one of the better season 5 episodes, but more importantly, this episode actually has a ton of interesting trivia, facts, and Easter eggs. I mean, even its production history became a bit of SpongeBob lore back in 2006. Over a year before the episode actually aired, an anonymous Wikipedia user claiming to be voice actor Tom Kenny's nephew leaked details about this then upcoming special. In that early leak, they even revealed the working title, Between Friends. This actually turned out to be accurate information about the episode's first half. I know it sounds very like my uncle works at Nintendo, like it sounds like that type of situation, but it's crazy that the kid was actually right. I wonder if Tom Kenny, SpongeBob's voice actor by the way, had to talk to his nephew about the leak, as if you really think about it, something like this could have gotten his uncle in some serious trouble with Nickelodeon. But then again, you can probably get away with a lot when you're like the voice of Nickelodeon's most profitable character. I mean, what are they gonna do? Replace Tom Kenny? Moving on though, within the episode's story, the writers made a little mistake with Mr. Krabs' backstory. In Friend or Foe, we learned that Mr. Krabs grew up extremely poor.
Yeah, where'd you do your clothes shopping, the trash can?
'Twas true. I did get me clothes from the trash.
But here's the thing, this isn't necessarily true. If we rewind back to one of my favorite episodes, Krusty Krab training video, there was a flashback scene where we learned that the child version of Mr. Krabs was actually just as greedy and cheap as he is in the modern day. I mean, I guess he could have been cheap because he was broke when he was younger, but I don't know. This just seems like the writer of Friend or Foe isn't super familiar with older SpongeBob episodes, and they haven't seen the episode Krusty Krab training video. And because of this, they got the backstory slightly incorrect. But I'm also admittedly nitpicking. So let's switch it up and talk about some interesting facts about this episode. And the first one can be found when Mr. Krabs and Plankton concoct their very first burger together. As they argue over the failed recipe, Mr. Krabs blurts out an ingredient.
Well, it was your fault the patty was tainted.
You're the one who put too much seaweed sauce in the burger.
This is really interesting, as for the first time, the show drops a hint about the legendary Krabby Patty secret formula. Krabs essentially confirms that seaweed sauce is one component of a Krabby Patty. I know this recipe technically failed, but Mr. Krabs says that he put too much. So it does seem like seaweed sauce would be in a Krabby Patty, or on a Krabby Patty. Just Plankton puts too much. Pretty cool though, right? Now we just need to find out all of the other ingredients and find out if Mr. Krabs uses crab meat, as it's been hilariously rumored for years. Who's heard that one before? But another interesting fact about this episode revolves around Karen, Plankton's computer wife, of course. Friend or Foe actually marked the first ever TV show appearance of Karen's mobile robot form. Before this, Karen was always depicted as a screen in the chum bucket. But in Friend or Foe, Plankton wheels Karen around in a robot body.
In those days, I was just starting out as a security system. Plankton and I met when he installed me.
It was only our third day.
This probably seems like not a big deal at all right now, but at the time, this was a pretty big change. And honestly, it was a really smart one from like a writing perspective, as it let Karen as a character evolve. Like she really turned into the Karen we know after this, due to the fact that she wasn't confined to Plankton's lab anymore, allowing her to interact with other characters other than Plankton. And this gave us many memorable moments. But yeah, some interesting trivia, but how about an actual Easter egg? Well, the Patchy the Pirate segments carry their own hidden gems, as in one scene, Patchy is in his kitchen, and if you look closely at the background right here, there's a large wooden barrel labeled SpongeBob SquarePants sitting in Patchy's clutter. If it looks familiar to you, it's because this barrel is a direct prop from the opening of the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, where a similar barrel with the show's logo appears on the pirate ship. It's almost as if Patchy salvaged that movie prop for his own use. All told, Friend or Foe is a great episode. One of my favorites from season 5, other than Jim, the original fry cook, that's also a banger season 5 episode, but I highly recommend watching Friend or Foe after you're done watching this video, because I've got more Easter eggs, lore, facts, trivia coming up. In the episode Happy Krabby Birthday, SpongeBob and Squidward scramble to find a birthday present for their very greedy boss, Mr. Krabs, which, if you really think about it, is kind of funny because I don't think Mr. Krabs would even get SpongeBob or Squidward anything for their birthday. I don't even think this dude even pays SpongeBob, and he's also like worked both him and Squidward to death many times. But anyways, this isn't an audit of Mr. Krabs as a boss. This is an Easter eggs video, and there's tons of Easter eggs in this episode, and the first few can be found when SpongeBob and Squidward head over to Lady Upturn's store, Upturns, hoping to find Mr. Krabs a gift there, with the duo eventually stumbling into this dangerous pets section of the place. And dude, there are so many really cool Easter eggs here. And I want to just give myself some credit. This episode technically didn't fully release in the US yet. It's only been released in New Zealand. So there's actually a bunch of these Easter eggs and references here that I found myself completely on my own, and I even matched them myself. As Squidward rushes through the entrance of the Dangerous Pets department, 2 posters can be seen right by the doorway, each featuring a familiar friend or animal from SpongeBob history. On one side is a poster of the purple sea monkey, a very specific one from the season 11 episode, The String. The dude is even depicted making the exact same like angry face that he made just before he attacked Bubble Bass back in The String. So yeah, seeing that same purple primate right here is a really cool nod to that moment. On the opposite side of the doorway, another poster showcases one of the deadly monsters from Delivery to Monster Island. It's the weird purple monster from that episode, one of the many gigantic weird creatures that SpongeBob and Plankton encountered. The inclusion of this poster is an awesome reference to a fairly recent episode, but it also hints that Upturn sells some truly outlandish pets. It may also be a wink at the animation team's own history with the series. Michelle Bryan, the animation director of Happy Krabby Birthday, this episode we're talking about, also closely worked on Delivery to Monster Island. And this is interesting as there's a ton of references to Delivery to Monster Island, in particular in this episode. Once SpongeBob and Squidward head inside, Squidward eventually gets like inked up by this giant spider right here. But just as this happens, if we look behind him, in a background tank lurks the 2-headed eel monster, the same one from Delivery to Monster Island. This double-domed creature was one of the deadly monsters, another deadly monster. And here it's caged as a dangerous pet. I definitely don't want to take him home. Also, just saying, I know we can only see one of his heads here, but if we look at a side-by-side of like it from this episode and from Delivery to Monster Island, I mean, come on, it's the same character. The coloring of the white is slightly off, I guess, but it's the same character. But yeah, back to that spider, which sends Squidward flying into the next room, which leads to Squidward crashing into this large aquarium tank, which frees another familiar character, the sewer snake, specifically from the episode The Sewers of Bikini Bottom. This is the same massive green sewer-dwelling serpent that tried to devour SpongeBob and Squidward all the way back in that season 9 episode. It's crazy to think that even season 9 is kind of old now. Like, just to give you an idea of how old season 9 is, it came out when the first Avengers movie came out in 2012. So yeah, we're getting old, guys. And season 9 is clearly old enough now for it to have references in newer SpongeBob episodes. And there's actually a ton more in this room if you guys haven't already noticed. As in the same shot, we can also see several other aquarium tanks in the background, each containing more Easter eggs. Like if we go over here, we can see the woolly mollusk, which first appeared back in the episode in security guards during this clip right here. If we look at this aquarium right here, we can see the original snail monster, the same one from Food Con Castaways. You'll remember this creature from this clip right here. If we look over here, we can see this weird U-shaped pink deadly monster, which is of course also from Delivery to Monster Island. I really tried to like find the name for this guy, but I could not find his name. So I'm just calling him the weird pink U-shaped deadly monster. We can also find the pink squid from Delivery to Monster Island right here in this aquarium, the same one who helps SpongeBob serve food. And hey, I'm just saying again, and look, I don't deserve a cookie for this. This is what all content creators should be doing. But if we go and look at the SpongeBob wiki, all right, and we go and look at episode references, you'll notice that a bunch of the ones I just talked about aren't here, and that's because I found them on my own. It may be updated, like if you go to the website right now, it may be updated, but as of this video and in the footage, in the screenshots I'm showing you, it's not there. And again, I don't deserve a cookie for that. Every content creator should be doing that. I'm just highlighting this so you guys know that I do put the work in for my content. Like, I love doing this, and I'm very lucky that I get to do it, so I'm not gonna go and be lazy about it. But anyways, if we head into the next shot, there's even more Easter eggs. If we take a close look and zoom in on the bottom left-hand corner, we can see the banana baby from Delivery to Monster Island. The same one who may look cute at first glance, all right? It's very cute, but it's actually pretty rabid. Yo, imagine some like incidental fish going to Upturn's, all right? Lady Upturn's store to buy a pet and accidentally buys the banana baby, brings it home, and almost gets his head bitten off by that thing. Like, this dangerous pet section should be closed. Why is this place open? Or just imagine if all of these aquariums got cracked open. Like, we've seen Squidward free the sewer snake, but imagine if they all got freed, Bikini Bottom would be cooked. And there's even more dangerous creatures in here, as right behind SpongeBob, we can catch a sight of Incidental 220, the round green rock bottom bus station fish. This thing is like a deep sea toad that you all probably remember from the episode Rock Bottom. And that one, SpongeBob tries to steal this dude's spot in line at the bus station, only to be scared off when the fish reveals its true form. This one's kind of weird because like Incidental 220 has always just been like a background incidental character and not a pet. Like, he's literally waiting for the bus in Rock Bottom. So the fact that somebody like captured him and put him in an aquarium in this episode's actually like kind of disturbing. This dude could have had a whole life. Like, we need to protest this shit or something, dude. Somebody free my boy Incidental 220. Like, forget Mr. Krabs' birthday present. Like, Squidward needs to free that guy. It also makes you wonder, like, what sets the difference between being like an actual citizen in Bikini Bottom and being a pet? Because they're all like fish and like sea creatures, right? But anyways, this is getting too deep. That is an interesting topic for like another video though, right? In that same shot, right beside that sea toad's tank is another glass enclosure containing two fluttering jellyfish bats. These hybrid creatures appeared in the stop motion special, The Legends of Bikini Bottom, where SpongeBob's Halloween dream featured jellyfish that turned into bat-like creatures. Their cameo here, flopping around together in a pet store tank, is yet another cool Easter egg. Moving upward to the top left of the scene, we can spot the spiky form of the squid urchin. This weird little creature debuted in Gary's Playhouse, an episode where Gary becomes friends with an urchin.
That garbage can looks like Squidward's house.
Here's a side-by-side, and yeah, the one in this tank right here from Happy Krabby Birthday looks nearly identical to the one seen in Gary's Playhouse. But finally, if we head over to the right side, we'll see a large algae-covered monster clam. And this is actually a green variant of the big clam monster from Plankton's pet. And that episode, Plankton's attempt to find a pet led him to an algae-coated giant clam.
You know, I can't say I'm surprised.
This is another interesting one, as if we look at the two side by side, there are some differences, right? For example, the colors are very different, but this is the first time that we've seen this big clam character since Plankton's pet. So even if it's not the same one, this is clearly a very sneaky reference to that episode. And yeah, that does it for all of the pet references, but just rewinding a little bit, like I mentioned earlier on in this episode, Michelle Bryan was the animation director for this one. And like I referenced earlier, I don't think it's a coincidence coincidence that a lot of the characters that they clearly created back in Delivery to Monster Island appeared in this episode. So some fun trivia for you right there. I pay attention to everything, alright? Cartoon Corey's got the eyes of a hawk. Moving on though, this episode doesn't just limit itself to like background cameos, it also throws in a few continuity references and character callbacks during the story. For example, after surviving the pet department fiasco, SpongeBob and Squidward do eventually secure a present for Mr. Krabs, leading us to the final scene, where they present the gift to Mr. Krabs at his birthday party. When this happens, Squidward suddenly lunges to take credit for the entire thing.
The old Krabby cart?
It was all my idea.
I left this cart at Goo Lagoon a long time ago. Because I hated it!
He gives Mr. Krabs a smug grin and tries to imply that he was the one behind the whole thing, which if you've watched the episode isn't very true. More importantly though, this moment is actually a cheeky callback to the episode The Lost Mattress, in which SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward bought Mr. Krabs a new mattress. In that story, Squidward likewise attempted to steal credit for the gift.
We noticed how miserable you were on your lumpy old mattress.
So I suggested we get you a new one.
I thought it was your idea.
So like I said, this is some good continuity, seeing Squidward do pretty much the same thing years later in Happy Krabby Birthday. Dude, my mouth is so dry today that I can't even say it right. Birthday. There we go. I can pronounce words correctly, guys. Only sometimes though, as you guys have seen in the past. But finally, the episode sneaks in a cameo from a character that we haven't seen in a decade. But for this, we have to rewind all the way back to the start of the episode. As Squidward readies himself, his reflection suddenly comes to life as alternate universe Squidward. This alternate version of Squidward originally comes from the episode The Algae's Always Greener from season 3, where Plankton's wishful alternate reality featured a Squidward who worked for Plankton instead of Mr. Krabs. He's also appeared in multiple other episodes, considering the fact that he's like an alternate version. For example, the character also pops up in season 9 Squid Plus 1, but it's heavily implied that all of these different alternate versions of Squidward are the same one. And this is why the character popping up again in Happy Krabby Birthday is actually like kind of interesting. And it's also the character's first appearance in like nearly 12 years. So yeah, welcome back, dude. When Plankton's beloved pet amoeba Spot makes an unexpected comeback in the episode Spot Returns, he brings a big surprise. Spot has had a litter of adorable puppies. They're really cute, but they also would be pretty slimy, I feel like, but that's just my opinion. Now, there's lots of Easter eggs we're going to be talking about, and some of them are crazy. Like, you want to stay tuned for these Easter eggs, but in order for any of them to make sense, I need to recap the plot a little bit and give you guys context. The episode's premise centers on Plankton trying to harness these new minions for one of his nefarious schemes. Well, chaos erupts as the tiny amoebas overrun the chum bucket. In the opening scene, even Plankton's computer wife Karen can't handle the cuteness overload. So she crashes and reboots when she sees how many cuddly cute puppies Spot has produced. And this is where we can find our first reference.
Cute overload.
Now, when this happens though, Karen makes a certain sound effect here, as you guys just heard. Attentive fans will notice that Karen's reboot sound is a nostalgic nod, as it mimics the classic Apple Macintosh startup chimes. Here's a side-by-side, here's the sound effect from Spot Returns. And here's the iconic sound effect that it's referencing. They're very close, right? I mean, this cheeky real-world reference fits perfectly with Karen's computer persona and immediately sets the tone for all of the other references and Easter eggs in this episode. But let's keep it going and talk about another Easter egg. As Plankton regains control, Karen helps name a few of the new amoeba, and the names themselves are actually like a huge Easter egg, as they hide tributes to SpongeBob's real-life creators.
No, I didn't name you Stephen and Karen and Clayton and Vincent and Cute overload.
Karen rattles off a few names in rapid succession. For example, Vincent is one of them, a wink to longtime crew member Vincent Waller, someone who's pretty much kept the series alive since Stephen Hillenburg's passing. But speaking of Stephen Hillenburg, there's even a reference to him, as she names one of them Stephen, another one of them Karen, and another one of them Clayton, which savvy SpongeBob nerds like myself will recognize as a homage to the Hillenburg Hillenburg family. Steven Hillenburg, of course, is SpongeBob's creator, and the person that brought this entire series to life. Like, the show really has not been the same since he's passed away. Like, I mean, come on, seasons 1, 2, 3, and a little bit of 4 are the best seasons, and those are the ones that Steven Hillenburg really contributed to. But yeah, he's referenced here, but also Karen and Clay are the names of his son and wife. So a really special Easter egg here. It's a heartfelt Easter egg subtly worked into Karen's dialogue that honors the people behind the show and made it what it is today. Also, a fun fact for context, this episode also marks Spot's first appearance since his debut in the season 9 episode Plankton's Pet. He was introduced in that episode in this clip right here.
Oh no, Plankton!
You know, I can't say I'm surprised. Hey there, little guy.
But then he kind of disappeared and became pretty rare. But Spot Returns, I mean, the title implies it, was his first time coming back. And at the time, it was a pretty big deal. But let's keep it going, I've got even more Easter eggs. The plot soon shifts to SpongeBob, who crosses paths with Plankton amid the puppy pandemonium. Just before SpongeBob discovers Plankton painting a free puppies billboard, with him trying to get rid of all of the new amiibos he has. I just called them amiibos by accident, but they're actually called amoebas. I've had to look up the pronunciation like 5 times in this video, just saying. But yeah, with Plankton having so many of them, he wants to give them away and makes this billboard. But this whole scene in general hides another Easter egg. Just before SpongeBob runs into Plankton, we see him blowing bubbles. And longtime fans likely will do a double take when you see this clip right here, as the bubbles SpongeBob blows take the shape of an elephant and a caterpillar. And this might seem random, right? Like, Cartoon Corey, what are you talking about? But this is a reference, as the elephant and caterpillar bubbles look exactly how they did all the way back in the season 1 episode Bubble Stand. In that season 1 episode, SpongeBob showed off his expert bubble blowing technique to Squidward, and even formed an elephant bubble to show everyone what he could do. He also did a caterpillar in that same episode.
It's a giraffe!
Well, Spot Returns recreates these whimsical bubble shapes as a really cool callback, dude, visually linking SpongeBob's early antics to the present day. It's a seamless reference that fits within the scene, and also rewards nerds like me with a cool little Easter egg or reference. And there's more. Later in the episode, SpongeBob agrees to help find homes for Spot's offspring, leading to a sequence where he delivers amoeba puppies to various Bikini Bottom residents. And we're gonna get an Easter egg here, but I'm just saying, would you guys take one? Like, if SpongeBob and Plankton were going around giving free amoeba puppies, these slimy things right here, would you take one? I think I would, but I don't know. Let me know if you would in the comments, I'm curious. But yeah, when this happens, one stop is Mrs. Puff's house, and this scene is packed with deep cut SpongeBob lore. As an overexcited amoeba puppy wreaks havoc at Mrs. Puff's place, we can see this very important photograph right here, which turns out to be Mr. Krabs. A cool nod and a nice little bit of continuity referencing their on and off relationship which spans the series. Longtime fans will recall episodes like Krusty Love, where Mr. Krabs courted Mrs. Puff.
You're a very sweet man, Mr. Krabs.
So seeing her keep a photo of them, like I said, is cool continuity and a cool reference to Krusty Love. And just saying, like, what makes this special is the fact that Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff's relationship isn't always acknowledged. It's more of a background detail, and it was actually pretty rare up until this point for it to be referenced. Nowadays, it's referenced all the time. Like in modern SpongeBob, there's an episode where Mrs. Puff starts flirting with Larry and Mr. Krabs gets jealous in the more recent seasons. But at the time, this right here in Spot Returns was a pretty cool and rare Easter egg. And believe it or not, there's another Easter egg in this exact same scene. Another picture on Mrs. Puff's wall shows a pet snail. And this one right here is a deep cut. This is actually an Easter egg that only the most dedicated nerds like me will catch, as this snail right here is Annette, Mrs. Puff's pet snail, who first, and up until now, only appeared in the season 3 episode, The Sponge Who Could Fly.
My snail is up a tree, harder since I was a little girl. Gotcha!
Next time, try the elevator.
In that lost episode, SpongeBob rescues Mrs. Puff's snail Annette from a treetop. Now, we haven't seen Annette like in the flesh since then, but it's cool to know that, you know, the writers and the art team, and more importantly, Mrs. Puff hasn't forgotten about her snail. So yeah, lots of cool references in this episode. Spot returns. I highly recommend it, but you guys already know what's gonna happen here. Let's head into another episode with more Easter eggs. The episode Squid's Visit is a very weird one from season 6, where SpongeBob is so desperate for Squidward to come over to his home that he constructs Squidward's entire house inside his pineapple. Now, it's not the best episode by any means, but it does have some cool Easter eggs that I want to talk about. But yeah, this episode is kind of hated by SpongeBob fans, just saying. So we won't dive into the plot too much, and let's just focus on the actual Easter eggs. If we fast forward into this episode, there's a moment where Squidward goes over to SpongeBob's place to retrieve a borrowed vacuum cleaner. But when he enters, he's absolutely stunned to find an exact replica of his living room and art gallery waiting for him. SpongeBob is very committed.
He copied all 492 of my self-portraits. And they're better than mine.
As Squidward steps through SpongeBob's door, he immediately recognizes his gallery of self-portraits lining the walls. And if these look familiar, it's because we've seen them before. And this is actually the Easter egg here, as if we head over to another season 6 episode, Not Normal, this is actually where we first got to see all of these self-portraits, as you can see here in Not Normal. And Squidward has quite the lineup. Like, there's some serious variety here. There's close-ups of Squidward's face, which seem to be the most common self-portrait of Squidward. There's also abstract pieces, like this one right here is pretty crazy to look at. And even a random clown painting, which if you think about it is kind of deep because these are all self-portraits, right? So this is Squidward calling himself a clown. This portrait right here with a black background shows Squidward's eyebrows so close that it actually kind of resembles Squilliam. Like if we do a side-by-side, like that almost looks like Squilliam. Maybe this was an intentional reference, but it also might have just straight up been like a mistake. But yeah, all of these self-portraits were introduced in Not Normal. And if we jump back over to Squid's Visit, the art team brought all of those exact same paintings back, as we can see right here. If we do a side-by-side, we can see that the artists literally like copied and pasted, giving us a really cool reference in Squid's Visit to Not Normal. Before this, as you guys know, Squidward's always been into art. This is like a major part of his character. But before Not Normal, the self-portraits were very random. We would see random ones whenever Squidward was inside of his house, but we never seen his actual art room. So yeah, season 6 was the writers firmly cementing this area of Squidward's house as like canon. It's like a canonical part of Squidward's house now, rather than it just being a one-off gag. This type of consistency is sometimes rare in SpongeBob's world, so this continuity nod is really nice. And what I really like about this one is the behind-the-scenes implications here. The production team clearly decided that Squidward's self-portrait gallery was here to stay and would continue to pop up in future episodes. For now, let's keep on talking about Not Normal and Squid's Visit from season 6. As if we go back to Not Normal, there's a moment where Squidward claims to have 483 self-portraits.
Well, today is dusting day, the day I dust my 483 self-portraits.
Wow.
But this was actually updated by the episode Squid's Visit, where he gives us a new number, an updated number, that being 492.
He copied all 492 of my self-portraits.
This is really cool and some good continuity from the writers, as it means that between these two episodes, between Not Normal and Squid's Visit, Squidward painted 9 new self-portraits. And like, this isn't that big of a deal, but I like that the writers were actually thinking about these things, right? It shows and kind of proves the point I was making before, that in season 6, like there was a conscious effort to add to this artist element of Squidward, of his personality, by a very specific background character. And I'm just saying, at first this is gonna seem like I'm reaching, but you guys know I love my rare incidental and background characters, so let's dive into it. In one scene, SpongeBob visits a grocery store where the cashier is a purple fish with a tan shirt and red tie. Well, longtime viewers might get a little bit of nostalgia here, as the same cashier character has appeared only a handful of times in the series, making him somewhat of a rare Easter egg when he does show up. His first appearance was back in the episode Whale of a Birthday from season season 4, where in that episode, SpongeBob buys a birthday gift for Pearl. I believe it was a comb at the Bikini Bottom Mall. And yeah, the cashier gives SpongeBob a hard time since he's trying to use Mr. Krabs' credit card to make the purchase. Now, again, this is why this one feels so random, but what makes it kind of like a clear Easter egg here is that the animators could have drawn any generic incidental character to man the register in Squid's visit. They've done this before, where we've seen cashier characters that are not this character, but for some reason in this episode, they deliberately chose to use this character, the cashier. I don't know why, but it's cool to see him pop up again. Now, earlier I was praising the writers and the art team for the continuity of the portraits, right, of Squidward's portraits, but that same team made a couple of mistakes in this episode, more specifically the writing team, as most notably, Squidward, upon arriving at SpongeBob's creepy duplicate house, claims that he's never been to SpongeBob's house before.
I can't even remember your last visit.
That's probably because I've never visited you.
Yeah, I don't know what the SpongeBob team is smoking. Definitely some good stuff, because this is not accurate at all. I mean, we've seen Squidward inside of SpongeBob's pineapple house many times before this. For example, like literally in the episode Can You Spare a Dime, Squidward temporarily lives with SpongeBob. He's also barged into SpongeBob's home in episodes like Nature Pants, and in the episode Sleepy Time, among others. So yeah, Squidward claiming that he's never been in there is just like completely incorrect and is some bad continuity. Like, you can tell whoever wrote that line didn't watch older SpongeBob. They weren't as familiar with the series and just assumed that Squidward had never been there before. And to make things even weirder, later on in this episode, Squid's Visit, Squidward also says that he's never called the SpongeBob before, which is also very weird, as in episodes like Home Sweet Pineapple or The Paper, Squidward has indeed given SpongeBob a phone call. So yeah, these writers definitely need to do their homework on older episodes, but it's not that big of a deal, I guess. And who knows, maybe here's a little theory for you guys, all right? I'm gonna get my map pad on here. There is a chance that maybe this episode, Squid's Visit, actually takes place earlier in the timeline. So it's set before any of the episodes I've mentioned where Squidward has gone into SpongeBob's house. But at this point, I'm just reaching. I love theory videos and I actually plan on making some of them, but they're hard because you do have to reach a little bit, but they're very entertaining. Nonetheless, though, that's it for this one, and let's head into another episode with more Easter eggs. Dude, this SpongeBob episode has so many Easter eggs in it. In the season 16 episode, Squidward's Tough Break, this is a fairly new one, by the way, Squidward Tentacles finally gets a day off of work and his boring job at the Krusty Krab and plans a fancy brunch at a high-class bistro. Or is it bistro? I don't know, let me know in the comments. All I know is that those places usually have bagels and coffee, and that stuff is really yummy. But yeah, Squidward, dressed to impress, heads to what he believes is this cafe, only to end up at a very rare and infamous location, the Salty Spittoon. And dude, this is where we can find a ton of Easter eggs. Fans will recognize this place as the same like dive bar first introduced all the way back in season 3's No Weenies Allowed, where only the toughest fish dare to enter.
I had a bowl of nails for breakfast this morning.
Yes, so?
Without any milk.
Right this way. Sorry to keep you waiting.
In that classic episode, SpongeBob famously struggled to prove his toughness at the door. And I'll be honest, we've actually seen the Salty Spittoon plenty of times since No Weenies Allowed. Nonetheless, in this episode, the writers were smart. They put Squidward in the Salty Spittoon. He runs into Reg, this guy right here, the very same doorman from No Weenies Allowed, who literally chucks him through the doors of the bar. Well, from this point onward, this episode gives us a shit ton of nostalgia, with there being a bunch of Easter eggs and familiar faces. For example, one of the very first is a deep cut character. This guy right here, Harry the Health Hazard. He's like a wrestler who hasn't appeared in quite a few years at this point. This dude first showed up in the season 12 episode Patrick's Tantrum, and he's back here in Squidward's Tough Break, seen among the Salty Spittoon's patrons. This sets up for a quick gag where Reg promptly punches Harry right in the stomach. Ouch. That looks like that would really hurt. I don't think I personally want to mess with Reg. The Easter eggs and references continue inside the bar, as the episode literally becomes like a who's who of all of SpongeBob's different like tough background characters. I mean, the show's team clearly had a blast populating this episode and the Salty Spittoon with obscure tough guys from across the SpongeBob universe. There's a ton of them here. Another example is this dude right here, a fish that fans like to refer to as the Huge Guy, a giant muscular purple fish that you'll remember from the iconic episode The Fry Cook Games. Back in that season 2 episode, the Huge Guy carries Patrick out on his back.
Bow down!
awesome might of this huge guy who's carrying the real contestant, Patrick Star!
Years later, in this very random incidental character, the huge guy appears in the Salty Spittoon on the wall of the toughest guys. And there's still more. This entire Salty Spittoon section of the episode is like overflowing with different Easter eggs, and this was likely by design. It seems the writers in recent seasons have been eager to revisit it. Like, it's clear that Nickelodeon has made an effort to make the Salty Spittoon like somewhat of a reoccurring location within SpongeBob lore now. In fact, the Spittoon has reappeared a few times since season 13. So yeah, the location is back full swing in the show. And to fill out the bar's background, the art team seems to have dug deep into the character archives, and the result is a ton of rare character cameos during the Salty Spittoon sequences in Squidward's Tough Break. For instance, a tough ladyfish named Mo appears, a really cool Easter egg because Mo actually originally came from the Camp Coral spin-off series. Like, Mo isn't a regular SpongeBob character, they were brought into the main SpongeBob series during Salty Sponge, and later in this episode, Squidward's Tough Break, as we can see them right here. Another example is the HR Thug, who originally appeared back in the episode Selling Out, where he threatened Squidward. The art team needed to fill up the Salty Spittoon and looked for any random thug or criminal-like character they could find, and trust me, this is a good example. The HR Thug is very random, and he appears right here in Squidward's Tough Break. But we can also spot this character right here, the Biker Fish, originally designed for the episode Potato Puff. Like I said, the art team had to dig deep, so they pulled this character from Potato Puff, and they're now a regular part of the Salty Spittoon crowd. But there's plenty of classic tough guys that originated back in No Weenies Allowed that also make a comeback in this episode. For example, my boy Tattoo Terry. This guy, for some reason, just looking at him is so nostalgic to me. Here's a side-by-side of him in this new episode, and him back in No Weenies Allowed. There's also this guy, the Hate Fish, and even this dude, the Popeye Fish. Another very familiar fish if you're an old school SpongeBob fan like me that watched No Weenies Allowed back in the day. Now, to be fair, some of these characters have occasionally reappeared in other episodes over the years since No Weenies Allowed, but seeing them all assembled together back inside the Salty Spittoon, the very place that originally defined them and created them, is really cool. There are a ton that I didn't mention, so if there's any fellow SpongeBob nerds like me, let me know in the comments all of the other reappearances in the Salty Spittoon of characters who have appeared in the past that I missed. As the plot continues though, Squidward starts fitting right in with the Spittoon crew, eventually earning the respect of Reg and the gang, thus turning himself into a new tough guy persona known as Crazy Legs. This leads to a subtle Easter egg during a scene at the Krusty Krab, where Squidward shows up to loiter and mess with the normies, as he puts it. Squidward demonstrates just how evil he's become by doing something truly terrible, guys.
Mind if I double dip? No, 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 no!
I know, right? Put this dude in jail. Freaking lock him up. Incidental 1D is absolutely disgusted by this, but here he is in this episode making a very familiar face. And if this disgusted face seems familiar, it's because it absolutely is. It's almost identical to a classic reaction from the episode Something Smells. And that season 2 favorite, SpongeBob's rancid and nasty breath from his infamous peanut onion ketchup sundae. Like, this dude literally eats a sundae with ketchup in it. That's, oh my gosh.
Ketchup! Onions! Good thing I still have these peanut plants growing in the windowsill. A little texture never hurt.
This makes his breath so bad that SpongeBob makes this dude in the movie theater, Incidental 1D, recoil in just disgust from the smell.
I hope my horrible ugliness won't be a distraction to you.
Not at all, boy!
The Squidward's Tough Break art team faithfully recreated Incidental 1D's meme-worthy face, giving us a direct reference to that Something Smells gag, which is very nostalgic, at least for me. That's it for this episode though, but let's head into another episode, like I always say, with more Easter eggs. Let's talk about the episode Exchange Student Driver, a new one from season 16. When Mrs. Puff enrolls SpongeBob in a faraway driving school exchange program just to get rid of him, can't really blame her, our our absorbent hero finds himself in a familiar location, Clopnod, a bizarre town where reckless driving is the norm, so SpongeBob fits right in. The premise flips the usual boating school formula, where SpongeBob's chaotic driving style, which is normally a nightmare in Bikini Bottom, like this guy has nearly killed people before, turns out to be perfect in Clopnod. In fact, he performs so well and is such a standout student that the Clopnodian instructor awards SpongeBob with a driver's license, carved on a turnip, no less. And this is where our first Easter egg, well, I guess this is more of a fact, comes in. And don't worry, just saying, there are a ton of Easter eggs coming up, so stay tuned. This one's just really interesting, and it's actually kind of controversial. As if you go to the comments of the fandom page of this episode, you'll see that there's a lot of people upset at the fact that SpongeBob received his license, and I'll explain why. Creator Stephen Hillenburg, the person who created Bikini Bottom, made SpongeBob like the OG of SpongeBob, famously said that SpongeBob should never permanently earn his license. Why? Well, to preserve the comedic tension with Mrs. Puff, which is a big part of many episodes, including this episode, Exchange Student Driver, but also to fulfill Nickelodeon's mandate that the show should revolve around a school setting and a teacher character. For those of you who don't know this, Mrs. Puff was a character that Nickelodeon pretty much demanded. They basically told Stephen Hillenburg that if you're going to make a show like this, there needs to be some educational aspect to it, which is why SpongeBob goes to boating school and learns, though if you really think about it, the dude never really progresses. Well, at least he does in this episode, but that's the issue here. However, there's actually a workaround for this. By giving SpongeBob a license only in Clopnod, the episode cleverly skirts Hillenburg's rule without technically breaking it, since SpongeBob still isn't licensed in Bikini Bottom. He got his license in Clopnod, a completely different location. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comments, but do you think that because it happened in a different location that it makes it okay? But yeah, a fun fact about this episode I wanted to talk about, but let's get into an actual Easter egg here. As throughout this episode, as it progresses and we see SpongeBob at Mrs. Puff's boating school, longtime viewers may catch a classroom callback in this episode. This thing right here is the good noodle board. Mrs. Puff's star chart, or basically like a chart for how she tracks the behavior of her students. It made its first appearance years ago, like 25 years ago, back in the classic episode, one of my favorites, New Student Starfish, where SpongeBob shows Patrick the board and explains its function before class.
Those drinks are recorded here on the good noodle board.
Oh, sorry.
Whoa! SpongeBob in this episode eventually actually gets in trouble thanks to Patrick and loses one of his stars.
Turning, it is important to signal at least 50 feet from the
Big
turn.
fat meanie, you can't do that. She's the teacher.
What about the teacher? What? As if I really look like this.
Well, it's really cool to see it pop up again in this episode, and it shows that whoever wrote this episode knows their stuff. They're a real SpongeBob fan. As there's been other episodes that have shown Mrs. Puff's classroom, like the classroom at the boating school, and the good noodle board is not there. So this was intentional. Also, just saying, I don't normally do this, but if this Easter egg sounds familiar, it's because there's a very similar one in another episode that I covered recently, where the good noodle board popped up again. So yeah, just saying, this was a new Easter egg. Moving on though, I've got some more Easter eggs for you guys in the form of character cameos. And of course, all the cameos here are characters that are pretty rare. We're gonna be covering more cameos in other episodes in this video, so stay tuned. But let's get into it. As I mentioned, Mrs. Puff sends SpongeBob on like a boat driving exchange student thing, where he's being sent to Clopnod. And we get this scene where we see the travel there with a map. And there are a bunch of deep cut references on here. And I'm very proud, as they're ones that the SpongeBob fandom wiki hasn't even found yet. For one, just as the boat is approaching no man's land, we'll see right here that these are the trench monsters from the 2004 SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Now you might not see it right away because there's just eyes, but this is specifically a reference to when SpongeBob and Patrick are walking through right here, and as you can see, there's all of these different eyes. Also, they're very clearly like on the map in trenches, so yeah, this is a subtle reference right here, but it's definitely a reference. However, the next two are way more blatant. For example, just passing No Man's Land, we can see the Cyclops character from the same 2004 SpongeBob movie. This character right here, we can see that his leg or his boot is put down on the No Man's Land area of the map. Pretty cool. And if you were questioning the last two, here's one that absolutely confirms it. In that 2004 SpongeBob movie, we were introduced to Maximus, this character right here. And what I really want you to pay attention to is the small traffic light at the top of his head acting like a lantern of a glowfish. As if we go back to that same map part, look, Maximus is right here. The colors are slightly off as you can see in this side by side, but the reason we know for sure is that traffic light on top of his head right here, which basically reaffirms the other two Easter eggs I was mentioning of the trench monsters and of the Cyclops, who also all appeared in that original 2004 SpongeBob SquarePants movie. I imagine that whoever, like the production team around this episode, exchange student driver, one of them probably worked on the movie or something in the past, but who knows. One other thing I want to talk about real quickly, and then we'll head into more Easter eggs in another episode, guys. Stay tuned because I've got some of the coolest Easter eggs coming up. But here's some behind the scenes stuff about this episode. As remember how I said SpongeBob got his license on a turnip? We actually got to see the process of how this came to life, with Shane Richardson, Hannah Hong, George N, and Amy L sharing these drawings online, where we can see the first process of the photo, the second process of the photo, then we can see the shot in the episode where it's blank, and then finally this shot where we can actually see the driver's license text. And fun fact, these were originally painted before being scanned in with the lines drawn digitally. So some really cool stuff right there, but let's head over to another episode. So as you guys have probably heard, the consensus for SpongeBob's spin-off show, Camp Coral, is pretty negative. I mean, if you just search it on YouTube, there are tons of videos of people criticizing it, and I get it. The show definitely was a little bit of a cash grab, but if you ever hear somebody say that Nickelodeon went against Steven Hillenburg's wishes with Camp Coral, or that he didn't want the show to happen, it's come out that that is not true. And let's talk about that for a second, and then we're gonna get into more Easter eggs in a Camp Coral episode. But this in and of itself is a fact and is some trivia. In a 2001 interview with multiple SpongeBob production members, it was revealed that Steven absolutely knew about the show. He was weary about the CGI aspect of the show, but he was working on it and knew it was happening. Furthermore, Vincent Waller, another big member of SpongeBob's production, also went on to say that Steve absolutely knew about the show. The only thing we don't know is how he would have felt about the final product, as unfortunately he passed away before he could see that. But Vincent explains that Steve specifically left him and the rest of the team in charge and trusted them to guard his creation to the best of their ability. And it seems like they're doing that. So there's a little bit of trivia about Camp Coral for you right there. Nickelodeon didn't just force this show to happen like a lot of people think, but let's get back to the original Easter egg I was going to talk about. And it's from the Camp Coral episode Game Night, which is actually a really good episode and a good example of how good this show actually can be. This episode shifts the spotlight from SpongeBob to SpongeBob's summer camp counselors, youthful versions of Mr. Krabs, Mrs. Puff, and Plankton, as they sneak away from the campers for a grown-ups evening of board games. Well, this episode is a treasure trove of playful references, especially when it comes to the board games that they choose to play, with each one spoofing a real-world classic in a character-appropriate way. It's actually some really good writing here. Plankton excitedly suggests a game called Peril, the game of undersea conquest, clearly a parody of the global domination board game Risk, a perfect fit for Plankton's world domination obsession, and a cool reference to a real-life board game. Another reference can be found when Mr. Krabs counters with Money-opoly, a not-so-subtle nod to Monopoly, with the mascot looking exactly like Monopoly's Mr. Moneybags. He also looks like somebody else, you guys may have noticed, but he looks familiar to a certain Spongy dad. I mean, if we do a side-by-side, like, the mascot looks almost identical to SpongeBob's dad. A potentially intentional Easter egg that suggests that Harold SquarePants has another job in this universe. But moving on, Mrs. Puff shoots them both down, grumbling that Mr. Krabs always plays the bank and always wins, a wink to anyone who's caught a cheater swiping extra cash when acting as the banker in real-life Monopoly. Funnily enough, in the dialogue, it's recalled that the last time they played Slot Boat Racers, Mr. Mr. Krabs accidentally ran over Plankton's leg. This setup delivers a double Easter egg. As Plankton gripes about his still healing leg, we suddenly get a close-up and hear the famous line, "My leg," coming probably from the character Fred.
My leg is still healing. His leg!
But beyond the games themselves, the episode Game Night hides a sweet callback to SpongeBob's childhood comforts. When SpongeBob barges in on the secret gathering with an emergency, we learn that he's upset because his teddy bear is missing, only for it to turn up under his bunk bed covers later on. What a waste of time. But the teddy bear's design, a cute brown stuffed bear, will probably ring a bell for fans of the episode Skill Crane. In that episode, SpongeBob wins a very similar looking teddy from a carnival crane machine. The Camp Coral teddy isn't explicitly named, but its appearance feels like a tip of the hat to Skill Crane, showing that SpongeBob's affection for cuddly bears spans across his life. That, or it was just written that he would have a teddy bear, and because it's a generic teddy bear, it just turns out to be an Easter egg. But good job, because they accidentally made an Easter egg here, and it's actually a pretty cool one. Now, I'm almost done with this episode, but one more cheeky detail in Game Night is that there's a lot of jokes that are aimed primarily at grown-ups in the audience, as opposed to kids. For example, as the counselors set up their game, Mrs. Puff pours drinks into plastic solo cups. And there's another scene where Mr. Krabs conveniently sips on his cup, remarking that these child-free evenings are the only thing keeping me sane.
You know, sometimes I think these adult-only nights are the only thing keeping me sanity in check.
Though never clearly stated, the scene strongly implies that the adults are enjoying some camp punch. I don't know for sure, but I do think that this was meant to be one of those types of jokes right here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments though. The episode Hog Huntin' follows SpongeBob and Patrick on a wild countryside adventure, tracking down Old Man Jakin's prized worm hog, a pig-like critter, after it goes missing.
You keep your hands off my beautiful Beulah!
I wasn't touching her, I was just, admiring her beauty.
This episode dives into a ton of good humor that plays into the whole countryman stereotype. Think barnyards, beards, and backwoods shenanigans pretty much. It's a good episode. But it also hides a couple of clever pop culture parodies. One of the first gags comes when SpongeBob stumbles on Old Man Jenkins watching his favorite soap opera, Days of Our Styes. For those of you who don't know, this title is a really funny little goof referencing the long-running soap opera, Days of Our Lives. The show's writers are clearly winking at the audience here. Bikini Bottom has its own version of Days of Our Lives, only with hogs instead of people. And if that sounds familiar, it's because SpongeBob has spoofed this exact soap opera before in the episode Wary Gary. This one is a snail-focused drama called Snails of Our Lives, played on TV as a pet parody of the same series. Later in this episode, Hog Huntin' treats us to a musical Easter egg that's perfectly in tune with the episode's country western vibe. SpongeBob and Patrick end up literally living in Old Man Jenkins' enormous beard for a while. Long story short, hiding from an angry Jenkins after a failed hog catching attempt. During their cozy exile in his facial hair, and sings a delightful ditty titled Home in a Beard. Take a listen, but we can't play it for too long because I'm not trying to get destroyed by copyright.
Home in a beard, where the whiskers and stubble are weird.
If the melody and theme sound old-timey to you, that's by design. Home in a Beard is a direct parody of the classic American folk song Home on the Range. The original 1972 song famously yearns for life on the open prairie, whereas SpongeBob's version yearns for, well, the comfort of living in a bristly old beard. I cannot relate. Between the soap opera spoofs and folk song parodies, Hog Huntin' shows that even in jellyfish fields and barns, SpongeBob's world is never far from ours, or from its own past jokes. Next up is Hot Pearl Tato, another episode from Camp Coral. When a baby Pearl Krabs shows up at Camp Coral, SpongeBob and friends struggle to babysit the mighty infant. I mean, considering how much of a pain Pearl is like in regular SpongeBob, just imagine like baby Pearl. This girl one time almost flooded the entire Krusty Krab because she couldn't find a date to prom.
Here, take SpongeBob!
The fry cook? Do you know what that would do to my complexion? People will mistake me for a planetarium.
What do you mean?
I don't No!
So just imagine a baby version of her, oh my god. As I expected, she's a handful, crawling off into the woods, which leads to some wild encounters with mythical camp critters. In one scene, SpongeBob's camp buddies, Bubble Bass, Kevin, and Harvey, break out a board game called Escape from Mom's Basement. This hilarious fictional game is a wink at adult Bubble Bass's well-known living situation. I mean, also here's a side-by-side, as this game, Escape from Mom's Basement, basically looks exactly like adult Bubble Bass's actual setup in his mom's basement. And yeah, this is definitely the writers having a little bit of fun here. Later on in the episode, as SpongeBob and Squidward chase baby Pearl through the kelp forest, they bounce off a slumbering giant creature. And this thing should be familiar to you guys. It's a sea moose, also known as a moose snail. Now, eagle-eyed fans may recognize this beast, as it first appeared in the main series episode, A Cabin in the Kelp, blocking the Gal Pals road trip. Seeing it here marks the creature's return, now in a CG form, as it swats at SpongeBob and Squidward until Pearl shows off her inherited strength. The episode even brings in a campfire legend, a sea bear. And for those of you who don't know, the sea bear first appeared in the episode, the camping episode.
Maybe it's because you're not wearing your sombrero in a goofy fashion.
You mean like this?
No, like that.
It's had a few brief appearances since then, but its main role has been in the camping episode from season 3 where it beats up Squidward, so it appearing here is definitely some sort of reference. So yeah, lots of interesting Easter eggs in this episode, and let's keep it moving.